Now, I'd love to introduce our next conversation, assertiveness in a collectivist culture. Pratishtha is a gender-fluid pansexual individual based in Hyderabad, India. They train people of all ages to become better communicators through evidence-based assertiveness techniques so they may live more authentically. They also make hip-hop rap music to share their authentic journey as they navigate through their life. They are also the CEO of a mental health-based startup that organizes events, workshops, and support groups to connect mental health professionals and youth to ultimately destigmatize mental health in local communities. Welcome, Pratishtha. Take it away.
Hello, can you see me? Yes. Okay. Hi, that was an awesome introduction. I'm so happy to be called, addressed as they. It's very difficult to get someone to say they when they look at me. Automatically, they say she. But I feel so proud and so welcomed already. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's a great start. Okay, so I will immediately start sharing my screen. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I think you can see this right here. If someone could give me a thumbs up, I could get started. Thank you. Thank you. So I have intentionally chosen this picture that makes it look like I'm pointing to, hey, this is my topic. And this is from another talk that I was giving at my event. Okay. So this is my formal, what I would call a boring introduction, but necessary nevertheless. 24-year-old assertiveness trainer. I feel the need to mention that I'm 24 because if I don't, people just ask which class I am in. And I am like, okay, I'm in 6th class, like you can go ahead with whatever you want to believe. So when they see my face, I have to tell them, no, I'm 24. I am experienced. I promise I didn't just get out of college. I have been doing this for a while. So I'm a graduate trainee therapist, hoping to get my master's so I can call myself a therapist, even though I do have the training. But in the meanwhile, as I figure out my master's and everything else, I conduct events and workshops, which is quite rare in our setting. I think I'm the only one in my city doing it, is what I've heard, wherein like we try to bring young people and make them meet psychologists, but in a very sort of invisible way where I can hide behind the crowd. Like people aren't fully vocal about expressing their mental health in public. So let's say I feel lonely and I am suicidal. I would not want to go on stage and tell everybody that. I would hear a talk about suicidality and internally somewhere relate to it, and 15 days later text the host saying, hey, I kind of relate to that part, thank you for doing it. That's more like the audience we deal with. So this ambiguity, this unanimity, this hidden in the crowd kind of a feeling really helps people deal with their issues, because they're not fully ready to go to therapy or tell people, or there's 107 ways that everyone has here around me to not go to therapy, 107 ways to deal with their problems, but excusing themselves. So these kind of events sort of help them, get help without actually telling they need help. But you can call me Storm. I would prefer this name because it's very gender neutral, whereas Pratishtha is a very female name that my parents and my family call me. So there's a lot of like, it's very gendered. There's gender very heavily attached to it. But Storm is my stage name. As a rapper, I use my name as The Storm because I tend to storm into rooms with this big energy that I have, and I tend to change people's beliefs about themselves constantly. So I feel like I storm into their head as well. So it makes complete sense for me to call myself The Storm. But from there, I picked up this gender neutral, feeling to it as well. And it feels very validating and comforting. I'm 100% certified queer. Maybe I should have a few certificates behind, like the way we have in graduation, like, hey, I'm certified pansexual. nobody asked me how I figured it out, because there's this general tendency to ask, how do you know you're gay? How did you figure out that you're pansexual? Like, how did you figure out that you're straight? Like, so yeah, I'm a gender fluid pansexual rapper and coach, and I take great pride in introducing myself like that. I love to dance and I laugh loudly. I have a schizophrenic mom, and that has significantly shaped most of my life decisions and paths. And I feel like this is kind of important to mention because, yeah, and like I said, I can come across as a very young person who's probably still in school or just getting out of college, and what do they know about anything, to tell me anything. So somewhere, having a schizophrenic mom, having to take care of her from my childhood, always being the responsible child, being the only child, um, was quite a lot, and I had to grow up pretty quickly, and that kind of impacts why I am here so early at this time, where everyone else my age is still figuring out what they want to do, and I'm here helping other people figure out what they want to do. So why is that? Is significantly because of this misfortune in my life. And in this informal introduction, I would like to mention that I'm a proud Swiftie and Army, and they have been a very crucial part of my healing and growth journey. And I think it'll start to make sense the more I explain, like, why I need an external, like a singer or a rapper to tell me, to feel better about myself, and why it's so hard to get that kind of support from parents. So yeah, if you're still with me, send some like celebratory emojis in the chat, and I would know that I'm not talking to a wall. Literally any I'm scared to say your name. What if I get it wrong? Okay. I'm so scared. I don't want to get it wrong. Okay. You'll of course tell me if I got it wrong, right? Mariella, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. I'm with
Yay.
you. We are here. We got the chat box live as well. So keep going. We're loving your presentation.
Thank you so much. Oh, I love your energy. Okay, thank you. I'm glad I got it right. It'll be so embarrassing. I'm talking here about like culture and everything, and I cannot take people's names right. Okay, so this is the typical definition that I can find upon a simple Google search. And it's the same kind of definition that goes everywhere. What is assertiveness? It's about standing up for what you believe in, your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, without being like, say, passive aggressive. So passive or aggressive, or passive aggressive. So like being straightforward and upfront about what you really want, but not really messing with someone else's head. Like in the name of your rights, you don't bully other people. That's pretty much the idea. No matter where you search, like this, in 5 years, this is the pretty much the definition I have found. But here the key word is for me to talk about today is appropriate. Like, what is an appropriate way? And culture is a huge part of what defines appropriate. Like, I have recently been really invested in Korean culture and Japanese culture and Chinese culture, and it hits me really hard how similar it is to our culture, where they have these little things where if you're receiving something from an elder, you have to touch your hand here and you have to be very graceful like this. In Hinduism in India, we have this thing: you shouldn't receive religious objects from your left hand. You should only receive it from your right hand. And there's a certain kind of bend that you need to have, and there's a certain kind of poise. And if you're very loud and outspoken in front of an elder person, it's considered rude. But in America, for example, when I watch those videos, it's pretty cool, and you can call each other by your first name, which is not a thing at all. Like, there's no way I can call my grandfather or my aunt, uncle, mother, father, literally anyone who's probably more than 2 years elder to me, I can't call them by name. There's a set designated honorific for every person, every family member, everyone who's more than 2 years elder to you. It's sometimes we use G as in like JIG, like G, like Ankur Ji, Ramesh Ji. It's sort of like ma'am. So that is something you use with elders. So what one culture might call, standing up for your rights, and it's cool and you should do it and we're here for you. Another culture would call it rude and disrespectful. So what we're calling positive is interpreted differently in different cultures. Somewhere the same positive is considered aggressive, somewhere it's considered passive. So this is something that I have noticed, because we tend to, in India, we still tend to follow a lot of older traditional Hindu practices, which are not scientifically verified, but there's a lot of respect and importance given to them. So when we start to study in schools and colleges psychology, we tend to read American textbooks. So we follow American Psychiatric Association, American Psychological Association, American Code of Ethics, and we follow the DCM. DCM? Did I? DSM. DSM. I always mess this up. We follow the DSM. In some parts of the country, we follow ICD-10. So all of these books, none of them are written by Indian people. Even though they do try to include Indian culture, at the end of it, it's not an Indian person who did research in India and wrote about India. So there are a lot of differences, no matter how hard we try. One book to define across culture, there are still certain challenges. So what my textbooks taught me, if I go as a psychologist, as a therapist, and start telling people those things, what actually helped me heal, which actually come from a lot of Western principles, what happens? What kind of challenges do I face? I kind of wanted to talk about that. So I think this is kind of, I'm assuming everybody knows it, but I just wrote it just in case. So basically, the needs of the individual are more important in individualistic cultures rather than the needs of the group as a whole. So there's not so much about like, you can't have green hair, or you can't be queer, or you why are you sitting like this? It's up to you. There is still some sense of solidarity in community. It's not completely isolated and lonely either, but it's a lot more nuclear in the sense, like, for example, the number of family members or number of people in direct contact with you every day, or the number of people you share a house with. Generally, what I have noticed, like, I'm only going to talk from my perspective. Maybe it's wrong somewhere because I haven't traveled outside the country, but from what I see at home, it seems like individualistic cultures have a lot lesser people around them to tell them exactly how to live life. But in collectivist cultures like ours, it's what is absolutely important is that the group should not be harmed. So for example, if a wedding is going on and there are easily 600 people on a wedding, on an average wedding, there are easily 600 people. If it's a grand wedding, maybe 1,000 or 1,200. But like you're just pushed into this room and stadiums, almost stadium full of people you don't know, but they claim to know you somewhere. Like they claim to be your aunts, nephews, sisters, uncle's younger brother, and you're like, okay, I can't really place you. But they're like, no, I saw you when you were a kid, remember? I'm like, I obviously don't remember. My memory is from 3 years, like when I was 3 years old. So like you're pushed into this room, and now let's say I'm having a breakdown. There's no space for me to, share it with somebody, because everyone's just fulfilling rituals at the time. So everyone is so busy doing the right thing and showing up at the right time and doing this ritual, then the next ritual and the next ritual in line, which at this point, many of the elders also don't know why that ritual is done. So like a couple of centuries ago, Indus Valley civilization, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, there was a reason for each of those rituals. But right now, how many of them are environmentally, appropriate? How many of them are actually necessary? Why are we doing them? Even the elders don't know. So even our parents don't really know. Our grandparents somewhat know, but the tradition is sort of dying out, but the formality is continuing. So I'm here, like, let's say having a breakup and going through a full breakdown, but I'm in the middle of a wedding. So I have no option but to go and cry in the washroom. If I tell it to anybody, even if my parents are very understanding one-on-one, but in the wedding, they're so busy fulfilling rituals, they're not going to make room for my feelings. Suddenly, everything you need goes to the back end because the group is more important. And I have seen that be a cause of mental health issues again and again in my whole life. Korea is an example of a collectivist culture. The extended family is extremely important, and loyalty is an important dimension of this. Even if, at least in India, even if it is at the cost of your mental health, it's all right as long as the family is together. So in collectivist cultures like India, cultural norms are the BAP. Bap is like the father, but you can consider it like the godfather or like the daddy or like the boss, the patriarch, the matriarch. That you can look at it like that, like the leader, the one in charge. I gave so many synonyms. I don't know why I did that. But yeah, in collectivist cultures, cultural norms are the bar. The final decision maker is the cultural norm. Whatever is accepted, you have to follow that first. Do it because I said so. I had to take an example from Never Have I Ever, because never have I ever been so, felt so represented in mainstream media than I did when watching the show's clips. So this is something, this is really, I have not watched the scene. I'll say that beforehand, but this just feels like no matter where you go, there will be this sari and this ornament and there's some ritual that they always manage to find, and like even if they don't know why, it has to be done. So there's not much space for children to ask, why are we doing this? Why do I have to do this? I don't want to do this. I'm missing school for this. Is this really necessary? But no, most often in most households, it's just because I said so, and you're not supposed to answer back. So what we see in, let's say, we grew up, like our generation, we grew up with Hannah Montana, Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, One Direction, all of that. So we watch Wizards of Waverly Place, and we are like, hey, we can answer back. Hey, we can have opinions. Hey, I can color my hair green. And then parents at home would tell us, are you answering me back? Is this the respect I taught you? It's like a proper drama, but it's sadder. It's sadder because it's not entertaining when it's happening to you. So you're out here like, hey, but I just wanted to go out for a party for an evening. And I'm here growing up with American culture in my veins, but just in my house, it's not okay. But when I see them go for a party, I want to try it out. No one told me I can party. And now I'm seeing these movies and they're partying and sounds fun. I want to try. But then parents would be like, no, that is not acceptable. You're supposed to stay at home and study, and only study. Study doesn't mean you can also party on the weekend if you studied the whole week. No, if you study the whole week, study on the weekend, because why else are you living? That's been the attitude, at least till when we were growing up. But like, where does all that come from? From my understanding of our history, as well as my experiences with my older generations, what I saw was that, like, my father, for example, was born in 1964, and we got independence from the British in 1947. So it was just like 20 years or something that India had, after 200 years, built its own democracy, its own constitution, its own, republic, and all the rules and what do they want to do and their own vision for the world. Just right now, like just when my dad was probably, like, my dad was born like 20 years after that, so maybe he was like just in college when the rules were still coming up. We were still building ourselves. And I want to mention here, I intentionally wrote America because they used to call America, because my mom tells me that only one member in the family used to go to America once in a lifetime, and they would be everybody's god. There was that show off thing, like, what, I went to America, how is it, like, what was the experience, is it cold, how many sweaters do you need to wear? So it was really, we can still see, our generation can clearly see that scarcity mindset in our parents, where if you get like 100 rupees, you have to save 80 of it and only use what is necessary. So if the ice cream makes you happy, we don't have time for that. Save that money, put it in your education. So that obsession with education, obsession with dowry, obsession with getting their daughters married and getting their sons to IIT is still there. IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, which is where a lot of these, big names, what is this, engineers from the country came out. Not necessarily all of them, but it is definitely an obsession for a lot of Indian parents to send their children to IIT and do, like, even sell their kidneys if they must, but it has to happen. So there's the general scarcity mindset, and there's no space for mental health when you're surviving. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how do you think about your dreams and passion when you don't have food on your plate? Like, maybe you could, it's possible that you could be starving to death and you can only think about becoming a painter. Sure, that's possible. But I in my view, I don't think majority of us, if we can't, if I am bleeding and I can't even have a pad or like a menstrual cup, am I really going to think about, what will I become after 10 years? I don't think so. So there was no really a space for mental health and, for personal space, considering we're living in huge families. So this is the kind of life that our parents grew up in. And this is what they bring to the room when we are trying to talk to them about mental health. But what's been happening? I put a flower for both of them because there's beauty in both. I don't know, I'm so poetic like this. So I put flower on both because I find both of them a little beautiful somewhere. What's been happening is, with all this diligent, constant vigilance kind of attitude that our parents showed, they became rich. By the time we were born, they were able to afford international school level education for us. So they were so stringent and so, rigid, in fact, that helped them save up, that helped them raise us and, raise our standard of living. So we are not as poor as they were. We are like, I don't know, 30 times richer. I can't do the math. It's not that straightforward, but we go to international schools. We study Cambridge syllabus. We have Netflix. Like, the current teenagers are growing up with Netflix. So they're growing up with multilingual, multicultural kind of content. And like, we see one Satya Nadella every once in a few months. We're like, oh, another Indian man who became a CEO of an American company. Like, okay, what do we understand? Like, there's Mindy Kaling, there's Priyanka Chopra, there's Deepika Padukone. What is happening? So we're growing up in a completely different mindset, where we're like, it's possible, where we are not just poor. So everyone knows someone who has lived abroad or is planning to move abroad, and abroad means everywhere. Like, I have seen Indians everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, you're in Dubai? You're in Canada? Oh wait, that person's in Australia. I'm like, oh my God, I thought you were here last week. So we're everywhere. And I didn't grow up with that. But today's teenagers are growing up with that. The whole time I was in school, we didn't have Netflix. We didn't have WhatsApp. I got WhatsApp the moment I finished my 10th. But right now, kids are growing up with WhatsApp. So what does that do? The community, the exposure, what does that do? It's making things better. And so what I've seen is, in the last 5 to 7 years, the children who are growing up now, the teenagers who are growing up now, are so much more aware of mental health. It's easier to talk to a 16-year-old about pansexuality than a 60-year-old. It's super, 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 super difficult to try to explain to my parents that I like girls too, because they will flip it. And like I said before, they have 107 ways to excuse it or avoid the topic or deny it. So it's just like, oh, I like girls. Yeah, but like a friend. No, like more than a friend. Like a best friend? No, more than, I'm interested. I would marry a girl if I could. You would marry a girl? There's no way. No. And my parents would just become blank. My parents literally walked out. They pretended like they didn't hear it. They just and they left. There's no conversation. And now I know they know. They know I am. But we're not going to talk about it. Similarly, about sex. They think I've had sex. My dad's pretty sure I've had sex. But we've never talked about it. But if my boyfriend comes home, he will be like, why is he coming when you're alone? You should meet in public or something very indirect, which shows that he kind of senses that maybe I'm going to have sex with my boyfriend. But then he's like, no, you shouldn't. No, we shouldn't leave you alone. But then he kind of still leaves me alone. So I'm like, what is happening? So it's so ambiguous. You can't really talk about it. But we are growing up with watching all these things where we are so exposed to all these conversations. We are building mental health communities. We are talking to people about our concerns. We are learning about suicidal behavior, psychology, queer people and everything under the sun. And we are talking about it. So even people who are 25, 26, 28 are difficult to approach about this, but someone who's 16, 17 is really easy to approach about this. And I'm going crazy thinking at 18 you run a business and you know what is pansexual. Like, I was just a kid, I was getting my heart broken over some stupid boy, and like I was just wasting my time, and you run a business. So it's crazy. And corona really shifted, even for elders, the perspective, the importance of mental health. During corona, every other day there was an article on mental health, on therapy, on psychology, and suddenly everybody wants to be a psychologist. Suddenly everybody wants to go to a therapist. Suddenly they want counselors in every school. And it's very drastic, but for the better. So now parents are beginning to have that conversation. So I think I would say it was building up last 5 years, but just during corona it exploded. It just, the tipping point is crossed, and now we're all talking about mental health. We're still a long way to go in actually understanding what it means, but we've at least started. Some things like sex education, just considering that you might be burning yourself out. We still have a lot to cover, but it's a good start. Yay. So we're sort of moving from do it because I said so to let's figure it out together. Another, this movie also, it's called Turning Red. It's based on Chinese culture, but yeah, until I watched this movie I didn't realize how similar Chinese culture is to Indian culture. I'm actually shaken and like pleasantly surprised. I'm very happy that we are not the only ones who are like this. There are Chinese people as well. Who knows who else is like that? I'm very pumped up to see more and more, countries, different like representations. So I can see that only we are not like this. There are other people like us. Oh my God. So this movie was really amazing because there's a scene where the kid carries the mother through her ages, like through school, high school, teenage years, adulthood, and to this age. Like she literally handholds her mother and takes her through, which I think represents inner child healing. And that was really beautiful. So we're slowly getting there. There's a lot of improvements, as in we're way more interested in having this conversation. It's getting easier to draw boundaries. More people are taking interest in drawing boundaries. More women are becoming assertive. More men are learning to be kinder and better listeners. So things are definitely looking forward. But there are definitely some challenges that remain. As in, like, not every strata of communities are interested in this change. Many are still struggling for basic needs. Many people, even though they have resources, they are still in denial. They don't want to approach. But let's say, like, in my, just on observation, not based on research or statistics, but just on observation around me, pre-corona versus post-corona, there's like a lot more people interested in talking about these things than ever before. Before corona, I was one of the few people who were in my family who was studying psychology. After corona, my grandfather's calling my dad and he's like, she chose a good career. She chose a good career. There is scope. I'm like, I know. Congratulations that you realized it. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was great talking here. I hope it wasn't monotonous. I hope it was fun.
Thank you so much, Storm. This has been so lovely. Good luck to you and all the beautiful work you're doing out there. I love that you're highlighting the positive in all of this madness, right? So that the conversations are opening up and that, there's that intergenerational healing and, communication that has been long overdue, but, congratulations on just being your authentic self and sharing your message. I appreciate you, Storm. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.